Hey, welcome to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, and I'm happy to be here today. Think about it. Our view of God determines how we think and what we think on all moral, cultural, and economic issues. It even determines how we vote. Hope for the future of our country and our world lies in our ability to make God the issue in every issue. Today, we're going to talk about, are we fighting symptoms or are we winning the war? Brad Bright, thanks for being with us today.
Great to be here, Jim.
I love the fact that you want to break this stuff out for us. You don't want to just speak at us and throw stuff at us. You want to have a conversation to help us all understand how to make God the issue in every issue. As a Christian in the midst of cancel culture, of which we could be canceled any minute now, do you ever feel like you're playing whack-a-mole, Brad? Do you ever feel like Don Quixote tilting with windmills? I mean, how do you feel?
Well, it does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it? Because it feels like you take one step forward, two steps back. But the reality is many times we are tilting with windmills. We are playing a whack-a-mole because we're focused on the wrong thing. If all I do is react to culture and say, stop it, I'm on defense, then I am playing whack-a-mole. I am tilting with windmills. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how you move from playing whack-a-mole to actually moving forward.
And I think it's a mindset too. And I want to talk a little bit about that because there's a spiritual component to all of this, obviously. And a lot of times we try to do this stuff from our own strength. And that's not going to work in this, is it? Working this from our own strength.
No, not working in your own strength and not focused on reacting to the issues of the day. When we are in reactionary mode, we're not moving forward, are we? We're stuck and we're standing still. We have to allow not only the Spirit of God to work through us, but we have to make God the issue because, it's our view of God that determines how any of us see each of these issues.
All right, so let's talk about that. So what is the one issue that determines how a person sees abortion, homosexuality, transsexuality, divorce, racism, socialism, economics, illegal immigration, greed, poverty, lying, cheating, stealing, and violence? Oh my gosh, I want to go put my head in a hole.
Jim, I really wish you'd ask me a hard question.
Okay.
But that's not one of them. The issue that underlies every other one of these issues is it's one word. God. God. Your view of God determines how you view each of these issues. Let me reframe it another way, okay? How much sense does it make to tell a pagan to stop behaving like a pagan? Does that make any sense?
It doesn't make any sense at all. And I know that the church tried to do that the last 50 or 60 or 70 years, and it didn't work at all. It just alienated people.
It did. And Peter and Paul, when you look at how they reacted with the pagan culture, never once did they tell pagans to stop behaving like pagans. They didn't say change your behavior. They always said change your God. And remember, they changed the course of history. They literally transformed Roman culture.
In fact, what's really good is they never said to pagans to stop acting like a pagan. They just pointed out for believers, stop acting like a pagan. And if you're not going to, then go ahead and leave the church because that's not what's going on here. We're looking for transforming people.
They did say that to believers. They did not say it to the pagans.
Right. And that's been an issue. That's how, in your opinion, how big of a, I was going to say catastrophic consequence because we kept telling pagans to stop acting like pagans. How much of that really contributed to where we are today?
Well, I don't know how much that contributed today. That's one of those questions that's hard to quantify. But I do know we didn't make forward progress because we were so focused on the symptoms, we forgot about really addressing the cause and connecting the cause back to the symptoms. It's like when I talk with non-believers or people who don't believe in God, I say, look, my goal is not to convince you that God exists. My goal is to convince you that you want God to exist. I want to connect with them where they are. The God conversation needs to connect with people where they are and then take them where they need to go.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot more about that when we come back. You're listening to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, and we'll be right back.
Want to know more about how you can make God the issue in every issue? Get your copy of Brad's book, God is the Issue. Now in its third edition, you can get your ebook copy at brightmedia.org. Even better, if you subscribe to this podcast, you'll receive a coupon for one free download of God is the Issue ebook. Go to brightmedia.org, that's brightmedia.org, and get God is the Issue ebook today.
Hey, welcome back to God is the Issue. As today we're really focusing on, hey, are we fighting symptoms? Or are we trying to win the war? I mean, we got to stop fighting symptoms. And we got to stop telling pagans to stop acting like pagans. And maybe a better way to say it, Brad, because this is true. It says in Revelation that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So there's believers and there's pre-believers. Let's say it that way. Pagans just seem so tough, but they're pre-believers because everybody's going to believe in Jesus because one day, everybody's going to bow. Brad, speaking of everybody, there's 7+ billion people on the planet, somewhere between 7.5 and 7.8 billion. I heard that number recently on the planet. And there's almost 400 million in our own country today. How many different views of God are there?
Well, it's hard to answer that question because there are many ways I could answer the question. But let me answer it this way. Baylor University did a study on the 4 views of God in America a number of years ago. And the 4 views were based upon whether you see God as personal or impersonal, engaged or unengaged. And those are the things they tested for. So from that perspective, when you say personal, impersonal, engaged, unengaged, there's really only 4 views of God. But here's the amazing thing. You know, they did this massive study. I think there were 220 questions. It took them a year to do it. They hired Gallup to do the initial survey data, but it was phenomenal. But here's what they discovered. They discovered and they quantified that a person's view of God determines how they come down on all the social issues, all the moral issues, a lot of the economic issues, a lot of the climate issues even. And it even determined how a person would vote. I always kind of instinctively understood that, but for the first time, they actually quantified it based upon your view of God. Do you see God as personal, impersonal, engaged, and unengaged? It's a phenomenal study. So
personal, impersonal, engaged or unengaged?
And engaged or unengaged. And on that, they came up with they came up with a quiz that we now use on the 4 views of God. And here's the amazing thing. If you take this quiz, it's a little 10-question quiz on your view of God. I can look at and it asks you only questions about your view of God. I could then tell you how you'll come down on a lot of the cultural issues and economic issues of today.
Is that quiz on your website?
It's at viewofgod.com. We're going to put it on the Bright Media website.
Okay. But right now, if somebody's curious, they're like, hey, I want to take that quiz, viewofgod.com. Love that. Okay. All right. Brad, our founding fathers, we know this. If anybody that's done any historical study knows, our founding fathers were no dummies. These guys, first of all, put everything of their lives, including their lives, on the line to create this country, to honor God and glorify the Lord. They saw the danger ahead of time of the power of a centralized government when it came to organized religion, or came to actually just the freedom of expression of our faith, because they realized that organized religion had some issues as well. Talk to me about this. They understood this, didn't they?
Oh, they understood it well, and they did not want the federal government to go the route of most of Europe. And that is why the founding fathers started the First Amendment with Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. They did not want the federal government to establish a state church. However, they immediately added or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Why did they do that? They did that because they did not want the federal government not only to sponsor a state church, they did not want the federal government to ever censor religious speech in any public setting, in any public forum, as it does in education today. You know, here's the thing about our right to believe as we will about God. It comes before the right to free speech, the right to a free press, or even the right to carry a gun. And these were smart guys, as you said. So the question is, why did they put freedom of religion first? And that's really a rhetorical question.
Well, and I know in a future issue, we will talk about that. well, what about the separation of church and state? I mean, there's a lot more to this than people see, but I mean, it's a shame that the government has interfered so much. I mean, so why is there such a in light of everything you just said about what our founding fathers built into our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, why is there such a constant barrage of attacks against free speech and more specifically religious free speech? They really they really ramped up and attacked during COVID, didn't they?
They did. Here's the point. The secular elites spend a lot of time trying to censor religious speech, don't they? They tell coaches they can't pray before or after the game. But, they tell bakers, florists, and photographers that religion can't influence their business practices. But they tell valedictorians they can't pray in their valedictory speech.
They can't even reference Jesus. They can't even reference Jesus in their valedictory.
Yeah. No, they can't. But here's why. Here's why they do it. Because it's very difficult to start with God, right? And then to justify abortion or homosexuality or any form of immorality. But if you start with God is dead, then anything could be acceptable. Aldous Huxley, who wrote, Brave New World, he said this. This is a quote. Let me actually read this. Said, "The philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with a problem in metaphysics. He is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he should not personally do as he wants." See, that's why they don't want religion in the public forum, because they want to do what they want to do when they want to do it, and they don't want anyone telling them they're wrong.
Right. And Alex Huxley used big words that guys like me are pretty simple, but this is the way I've always understood it, Brad. You tell me if I'm wrong. As long as you don't believe in God, anything goes. But the minute that you believe in God, there's all of a sudden a moral authority, and there's right and wrong. And when there's right and wrong, that means there's guilt and there's sin. But as long as you ignore that, you can do whatever you want to do and live without guilt and sin. Although that's not true either, because I know a lot of people that say there's no God that still feel guilty. And they then lubricate up with alcohol and drugs in order to cover that up. But that's really what they're saying, isn't it?
That is what they're saying. They're saying, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, and I don't want anybody to tell me I'm wrong.
And lots more of this conversation coming up on the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. We'll be right back.
Brad Bright travels the country speaking and training people how to make God the issue in every issue. Go to brightmedia.org, that's brightmedia.org, to find out how you can bring Brad's highly interactive workshop to your area. It's fun, engaging, and most important, it will help make you more effective in making God the issue in every issue. Go to brightmedia.org, that's brightmedia.org, and schedule Brad today.
Hey, welcome back to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. As we're talking about, are we winning the war, or are we fighting symptoms? Because that's really the issue, Brad. Where we find ourselves fighting a lot of symptoms, and it all seems hopeless. The culture seems lost. What do we do?
Well, first of all, what we do is we get on our knees and pray, right? We pray, we ask God, what do you want? What do you want me to do? None of us can do the whole thing.
That's for sure.
But we can each do something. But here's the bigger question, and I think people are asking this. How do you change culture? I think that's what a lot of American Christians are saying, that we've lost the culture. How do we change the culture? And here's how you do it. You change culture by changing the way the culture sees God, right, one person at a time. And we do that by driving God back into the cultural conversation every day in relevant and salty ways. But we've got to decide we're going to put God back into the culture. Why does God matter right here, right now, in this situation, on this issue? It has to be intentional on our part, but we can do it. And that's part of what we want to help people be able to do, and to do it in a relevant way.
Well, so I'm getting a feeling like there's something we need to be willing to do, because I think what we've seen for the last 50, 60 years is Christians have disengaged from culture. What do we need to be willing to do in order to win this war?
Well, we have to, as I was saying, we have to be willing to talk about the one issue that determines how people view all the other cultural issues. That one issue is what? That one issue is, who is God and why does it matter? Because if we're not willing to do that, we might as well concede the battle, go home, close the door, and wait until everything comes just crashing down, right? See, patching the cracks without also repairing the foundation is folly. You'll be patching the cracks right up until the day the house collapses. On the other hand, if you are willing to make God the issue, to engage the God conversation within the culture, but you don't really know how, then join us each week. Our goal is to put more tools in your toolbox to help you do that in winsome ways, in effective ways. Our goal is to help you make God the issue in every issue. Again, think of us as your spiritual hardware store. You can do it. We can help.
So, Brad, our next podcast, what's on the docket for next week's podcast?
Oh, this one's going to be fun. Next week, we're going to be talking about Jesus, the master of spin. You know, Jesus always had an agenda. And as you read the Gospels, you see that he constantly reframed or spun conversations in order to drive his agenda. You know, Jesus called it being shrewd as a snake. Today, we call it spin. So I hope people will join us next week because it's a fun conversation.
Jesus, the master of spin. Brad Bright, that's going to be a fun conversation. Thanks, Brad, for being on your podcast today, but thanks for being here today. Thanks for challenging all of us to make God the issue in every issue. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Jim. Great being here.
And thanks for joining us today on the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. Remember, please check us out online, brightmedia.org, brightmedia.org. Lots of great information out there, lots of great tools out there, lots of great connections out there. And remember, always be kind, compassionate, and shrewd, which we're going to talk about a lot more next week, while making God the issue in every issue.